Rebellious Studio presents the Mind Body Podcast with your host, Maria Angelova. Welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, your host, Maria, where it is all about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. And today, it is my pleasure to welcome my guest with the coolest name ever, Maria Joyner. Hi, Maria. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me today.
It is such a pleasure, Maria. Maria is a serial entrepreneur and a co-founder of Founder Scale, And Maria has such a cool story. I don't know, is that about the name or something? That I would love for her to share with us and tell us. I also think what you do is fascinating, but we'll get to all of that in a sec. After you give us 3 words that tell us a little bit more about who Maria is and give us a little bit of a backstory behind each word.
Okay. Well, the first one I would say would be adventurous. I think my whole life is probably the backstory behind that. But just one quick example. About 8 years ago, I sold everything I owned and moved from Atlanta, Georgia to Costa Rica, and I've been here ever since. So I think you definitely have to have an adventurous spirit to do something like that.
Yes.
The second word I would say would be determined. I think determination is a critical component and skill of any entrepreneur, anybody who runs a business, starts any projects. So determination to finish, get things across the finish line is a very important quality, and I definitely would add that. The third one I would say would be a problem solver, for lack of better words. Again, I think that this reflects the entrepreneur spirit, but it also reflects the clients that I work with. And that's really what excites me. And then a little bit in my personal life, I like to run ultra marathons through the mountains. And there's a lot of problem solving that has to go on during these long mountain races. So I'd say those would be the 3 words.
And a few great questions are coming to mind. I'm thinking, which angle do we go to? But let's start with what you do. And I love something that you said in your scale. I love how it is said is you help founder-led companies scale to $1 million plus annually. And as a fellow entrepreneur who is scaling her business, that just gives me excitement. And it makes me think of the word determination, because I was just telling a friend that scaling is not for the faint of heart.
It is not.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about determination and from where you sit. I mean, you have created multiple successful businesses, and now you help others take their businesses to those higher levels. What is it that, in your opinion, in your professional opinion, and based on personal experience, does it take to take a company to $1 million plus?
Well, I think what's important to think about, there's not one thing that can take a company to $1 million plus. I mean, to be honest, depending on what you're selling, you get one client that's a $1.5 million contract and boom, you're at $1 million plus. And so when we say like we help clients scale from $1 million plus and beyond, there's a couple of reasons why that's the entry point and the important place that I help myself and my company helps founders scale. So it takes a lot of work to get to $1 million in annual revenue. 3% of companies in the United States reach that milestone. So only 3% of all companies hit $1 million in annual revenue. And once they reach that $1 million in annual revenue, what we've seen generally practically with every company is the majority of those companies that are services-based companies reach $1 million in revenue through the founder generating the majority of the sales, through their network, their industry expertise, and just the years of experience they have. In order for a company to go from $1 million plus to, let's say, $3 million plus a year to $20 million a year to get positioned for acquisition, private equity investment, et cetera, the founder has to move from working in the company to becoming a CEO of the company. And essentially, in less words, it's moving from founder-generated revenue to scalable revenue that isn't generated directly by the efforts of the founder. So that's what we help companies do, is we help them to get, once they've reached this milestone, We help them get to the next milestone. And much of that is a journey. It's not just, hey, you need this product, or hey, you need this service. It's a journey the founder has to go through. And that's where Founder Skill comes in.
And, you know, as you're talking, the question that comes to mind is, what is the mindset shift that is required to shift from, you know, somebody who, most entrepreneurs start their business because they love what they do. They're very like, I know I'm very protective of my clients. I want to take care of my clients. I want to take care of my clients the way I take care of my clients, right? So when you start thinking about maybe bringing in additional people to help you with doing what you do, there is a certain level of discomfort and a certain level of letting go and delegating. And talk a little bit about mindset shift.
So the mindset shift is a big one, and it's something that typically happens after the experience and not before the experience. So the typical journey that we see many founders take is, all right, we have a lot of sales. I don't have any more time on my calendar. I need to hire a salesperson. And they go out and they try to find a salesperson and hire. And they hire that salesperson. And 6 months in, the founder's like, wow, I am still closing all of the deals. I still feel like I am doing the majority of the work. So why does this happen? This happens because the majority of sales to date have been done through expert level selling. Like, I know everything, not everything, but I know a lot about helping founder-led companies scale, and I can sell you, I can close you. But when it comes to someone else coming in and doing that sale, it's very different. And so there's foundational aspects like, is there a technology in place where your salesperson is going to log their activities so you even know if they're doing those activities? So foundational like that. Do you have anything to support them? Do you have product spec sheets? Do you have a description of what you offer? Can you provide case studies, references? Does that person have what they need to sell? And even those two pieces, 95% of founders fall short when they bring a salesperson on. So I think the first mind shift is, you can't put money at a problem to solve it. Like, you can't just push money at a problem and solve it. The other route that we see a lot of founders take is going to hire a lead gen service. So basically they call or they do emails and they get meetings. That may work for 90 days. You may get a handful of meetings, but it's not scalable, right? So it's a mindset shift of scalable revenue. It's not bought. It has to be built. It has to be constructed, and it takes time to construct something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think another piece of mindset that jumps in there is the chicken or the egg, right? You want to hire somebody high caliber. You want to hire somebody who has experience in sales, maybe in your industry, who is really good at what they do, assuming that you give them the assets that they need to do their job. But there is that upfront expense you have to incur before you see the revenue coming in. So that's one. And then the other piece is, a lot of my corporate job was in process improvement. So I know the importance of having those steps and knowing that the whole team is aware of the steps and everybody dancing, following the same steps. It's a lot for an entrepreneur, because I would tell you where I am now. I'm doing a lot of different things. And right now, everything requires my check, my read, my preparation, my content, while I'm still doing everything that I do before. And it's like, wow, I need like a couple of me to catch up, because I realize I'm the bottleneck.
And that's the case for almost every founder. At some point when the business grows, we become the bottleneck. And I don't remember where I read this, but for every 30% of a business's growth, 100% of your processes get broken. So for every 30% you grow, everything basically has to be thrown out and processes have to be recreated. Okay,
so I'm glad I don't feel alone in that.
Yeah, it's actually a statistic to hear, but it's it kind of makes you feel like, oh wow, it's not just me. Like, this is a very normal thing.
I was reading something I read so much I couldn't tell you where I read it, and it basically said when you're making that, it's just like Pilates, what I do. I always tell people, you kind of cruise along and then you have a step up and suddenly you feel more depth into the way you move, and then you cruise along and you experience that. I think the same thing very much happens with entrepreneurship. And whatever I was reading was saying, when you're scaling, you almost feel like there's this mass chaos that's happening, because everything that you have built suddenly is not working, and you need to upgrade it to the next level to facilitate that growth. But that moment of change, it's like, whoa, like, hold on tight.
And it's not just a moment, it can be months and months and months of change too.
It's a really long moment.
Yes.
Yes. So, Maria, let's talk a little bit about passion. Let's talk about intuition. Let's talk about authenticity. Let's continue with the same theme in the context of entrepreneurship and growing as an entrepreneur and taking your business to the next level. And again, linking that to the mindset. Where do all of these things fall? Because when you and I connected and you shared a little bit about your story, I was like, oh, you're a rebellious spirit. You need to be on the podcast. Is because you very much took, and made the move that conventionally doesn't make so much sense. But let's maybe even share with us a little bit more about your story and what prompted you to move from Atlanta to Costa Rica. And then talk a little bit about what you see in terms of entrepreneurship growth.
Yeah, so I'd love to share a little about that story. So, for many years now, I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. My first company was a photography company. That's what I studied, and I eventually closed that to open a social media marketing company that really was more of a marketing lab that we worked directly with startups. So we helped startups launch from pre-revenue to revenue, and that was the sweet spot I focused on when I was in Atlanta. Through that journey, and I really loved it. It's like, it's just problem solving, nonstop problem solving, working with technology startups. And so through that journey, I participated in as a volunteer in organizations like Startup Weekends. So those were basically 3-day events where people pitch business ideas, and there's marketers and developers and engineers, and they build a prototype and they present it a couple of days later. And so I participated in a lot of things like that, that helped build and grow the ecosystem. I really loved it. I loved, and we were when the Atlanta tech scene was growing. It was a really beautiful time to be there. From that, I ended up closing my marketing company, got acqui-hired by one of these tech startups with the founder I'd worked with in the past. And we came on to basically grow it from 0 to $2 million in 18 months. That was the only salaried position I've had in my whole career. It was really amazing. A paycheck just showed up every 2 weeks. It was like, whoa, this is great. And during that journey, I was like, let me take a trip to Costa Rica. I had a friend who has a travel company called Under 30 Experiences. And I'm like, let me go on these trips. And so I booked myself a trip to Costa Rica in November 2014. And I flew down, and I just had this experience when I got off the shuttle, and we got off the shuttle on this farm where I just felt this huge, like, this is going to sound a little crazy, but it's like my soul jumped out of my body. And I was like, what was that? And so I had this kind of very interesting experience. And I'm like, I have to come back here to see what this is all about. And so I started planting the seed, and I basically decided before I left on this 5-day trip to Costa Rica, to this eco tourism farm, that I would come back to volunteer the next year, and I'd figure out how to make it work with the company. So fast forward, my co-founders, they bought in. They're like, cool, we'll make it a company-wide perk. In June 2015, anybody in the company can work from anywhere they want. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. So I was just sharing everything about this whole perk that we were offering our organization, because we were tech startups. So, foosball, beer, all the perks. I was really excited about this one. But it was a very selfish perk for me, because I obviously wanted to come to Costa Rica,
you inspired the movement,
and do all of that. So I got down here in June, and the second I got off the plane, I'm like, I don't think I'm leaving. And so June, July, August, my co-founder's like, Maria, what's going on? It was supposed to be a month. And so the whole time I was down here, I was like, am I losing my mind? Like, do I really want to leave this company I have Warrington? I helped grow to $2 million. We're on an amazing runway. I mean, at that time we were like, oh, one of Atlanta's like early success stories, to just leave all that to move to the jungle in Costa Rica. And I spent 3 months trying to convince myself I wasn't crazy. At the end, I realized that in order to do something like that, you kind of have to be a little crazy. So I flew home and tried to drop back into life. Like, I just tried to drop in like nothing happened. Like, I didn't have this huge profound experience. And about, I don't know, it was maybe a month or 2 months in, my co-founders sat me down and they were like, Maria, it is so obvious. You should go. And that's all I needed, really. And so I said bye to the team and sold all my stuff and moved within about a month and a half, 2 months. And that's what ended up here. That's what we ended up here in Costa Rica. And that's how I got down here.
How right does it feel to be in Costa Rica now, having felt a little bit crazy back then?
I can't tell you how many times I look back and I'm like, thank you so much, Maria of the past. Like, thank you so much, Maria of the past, for trusting and this feeling that I had, because it's been, I mean, that experience was in 2015. I moved at the beginning of January 2016, and never once, I mean, not even once have I ever been like, maybe I shouldn't have done this, or maybe I should go back, or maybe this wasn't right for me. And I'm just so grateful that I trusted myself enough to make that jump.
I can so relate to you, Maria, because about 2015, I started getting that feeling into the office, like, I really need to go after what I want. And I should, but just like you, I was like, that is crazy. Who gives up a 20-year career to go into something brand new? And I remember when I first shared it with my husband, he's like, you're crazy. He's like, that's an oversaturated industry. You're too old for that. And like, he kind of didn't really take me seriously, I don't think. And I said, well, I'll give it another year. And then a year, you know, like you said, I was trying to convince myself, this is crazy. This is just the stage. I'm probably like entering midlife crisis, you know, like I had all of these things, like why this doesn't make sense. But that inside feeling, that crazy feeling was just like constantly nagging, like, do it, do it, do it. And a year later, I talked to my husband, and I really don't think he ever believed that I was going to do it. He was like, yeah, we'll talk about it later. And I was like, 6 more months. And I was like, if that keeps going, I'm just going to quit. And I did. And exactly what you said, you know, maybe it was like more to calm him down. I was like, you know, if this doesn't work out, I can always go back and get a corporate job. Not one time have I been like, maybe I should drop this and go to corporate. As much as the trip, you know, the journey has been, there have been definitely tribulation, and it hasn't been no roses and, you know, caviar and champagne. There have been some very rough moments, but it just feels so right to be doing what I'm doing. And I feel so much to be living in my purpose. And I think sometimes that's hard to explain to people who have not done that, which is why I love to have other people share their experience that, yeah, this does happen and it is real. And to also give permission to people to listen to their intuition, because I think that's something that's something we're not taught to do.
Yeah, and one of the things that when our first conversation you said that I really resonated with was the more that you put your authentic self into what you do, like the more positive outcomes come out of that. And that was something for me for so long. Like, I'm like, I can't mix adventure Maria and problem solving Maria. Like, adventure Maria can't show up at work, and problem solving Maria can't show up in her adventures when they're all actually really, really closely interwoven. And the more that I bring my adventure self into work, I'm like, oh my gosh, you like to do that other crazy thing that I like to do. And so it helps to build deeper connections and in the workplace too. And so that's another thing, that's another theme that I really love that you talk about, is just the unification of, you know, your whole self.
And I would tell you, for me, and I do think entrepreneurship kind of pushes you to be more authentic, because really who you are, there are gazillions of Pilates teachers around me. There are gazillions of life coaches and mindset coaches, right? So why would somebody come to me than somebody else? I think part of it is your personality and the vibes that you put out that attracts the right type of people. And to something that you said as far as authenticity, it's so interesting because I actually was very good at what I used to do before. I'm very analytical, almost anal, but you know, that was great because I did external reporting to Wall Street. So you could really not mess up when you're doing that type of reporting. And I was talking to one of my mentors in the context of the body as we were talking anatomy. And I told him, I said, I really don't learn this way. And he goes, he's an older gentleman. He said, I know, dear. He goes, because you're very analytical. So you're always analyzing the movement. And it really made me realize that, you know, the reason I was so good at my prior job and the reason I'm so good at what I do now is actually very similar. But to your point, like I had them apart. I was like, this Maria who loves to dance and move and be kind of crazy and rebellious and loud and outspoken. And then this one who needs to be reserved and be in a suit and sit. that was just so not me, you know, like this is so me. And like in the office, people were like, you have so much energy and passion, like tone it down. I'll be talking about a system or data, and they're like tone it down, it's just data. And like here, a client of mine said, how cool is it that you have a job where you can be loud and obnoxious, and that could serve your clients because you're cheering them on to do something that's uncomfortable. But I think that's like my sweet spot. That's the real me.
The beautiful shift from the things like a great example of bringing, you know, your whole self into that, and really a beautiful shift of like the things that we're told are being too loud, or, you know, this isn't appropriate in this environment. Because in some ways that also that has to affect us, you know, in other ways.
Absolutely. You know? And it's, you just learn, you get conditioned. Like I tell my, you know, clients, like a part of you gets chipped up with each feedback that you get, and you start fitting more and more into the norms, and it takes you further away from who you really are. But there is such power and empowerment into being your true self. And I think your vibes are completely different, and then they become contagious to those around you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that has been such a beautiful piece of living in Costa Rica, because if you travel a lot, if anybody travels a lot, they probably definitely can resonate with running into people traveling, and you run into somebody traveling and then you keep in touch with them and you become really good friends. And it's because every people who just travel alone, we're just different. We're a little different. And it's the same thing when here in Costa Rica is you talk to people and I'm like, I just can't believe that this is real life every day. Like, I can't believe I wake up and this isn't, oh, this, I can't believe this is my real life. Cause this wouldn't be the dream for some people. This is my dream, but I'm like, I can't believe that I can just wake up and like look outside and hear the monkeys, or, you know, see the tropical birds, or this or that. I can't believe this is real life. And it can be. And I think that's the thing that when I meet people in Costa Rica who left corporate to move to Costa Rica, and there's lots of people who have a similar story as me, they're all amazed too that this is a possibility and this can be a reality. And it really just is a matter of tuning into like and understanding what one really wants, and like turning off all the noise of everything else in our lives and tuning into that to get real clarity. And I think without that piece, I probably wouldn't have been able to do this whole thing. Like without if I had started going around and asking people, what do you think about this move to Costa Rica? They would be like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, you know?
100% can relate, Marie, because I got a lot of feedback that what I'm doing does not make sense. And I'm so grateful that I listened to myself, because to my intuition really spoke to me very loudly, like, stick with this, even when it's hard, like, this is what you should be doing. And I'm so glad I trusted myself, because to your point, I mean, to somebody, they'll be like, what? You're like doing the same thing every single day? For me, that's a high. My clients, I feel like they're my besties. Like, I know about their families. We have the best conversations. I see the change in them physically, mentally. That fuels me. Might not fuel the next person, but that's what makes me happy. So I think you nailed it when you said, go after the life that you want, because we all want different things, and different things bring us joy and happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah, and it's like thinking about like, for especially if somebody is thinking about, I want to make this big change, it's like really sitting down and thinking through like, at what moments do I feel the most fulfilled? Like if I'm going to make this big life change, do I want to, for example, from the career, through the lens of career, do I want to shift my career to where I'm heads down working all day and I don't have to talk to anybody? Or do I want to have that constant communication? So I want to have a role, or I want to build a business where I'm in front of clients all day, and thinking through like what actually brings you joy and the moments when you feel that, and you could kind of back into like what maybe that life change could look like by tapping into, oh yeah, I really enjoy doing this, or when I'm doing that, I really feel a lot of happiness. And it may not be like, if you've been in corporate, maybe you want to become a chef. Like it doesn't have to be a linear move. It can be a totally separate move, but it's really tuning into exactly like your move from into the wellness space. But it's really tuning into, these are the moments when I feel the most passion. And these are the moments that if I have this passion, it can get me through anything. And that's stuff to really start tuning into and be like, oh, and just noticing it, like, oh, okay, I really like this thing. Or, ooh, for me, it's easier to say, I really don't like these things. Like, these are things I really don't like. And so being like, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. Like, I don't want to commute. I don't want to have an office that's more than 3 miles from my house. All these things I don't want. And then from the don't wants, we can compare those with the, oh, I feel these feelings at these moments. And then you can start marrying those to see what that new lifestyle might look like. It's interesting.
And I think the next step is, to your point, first becoming aware, because I can tell you how many people I ask, what do you want? And they look at me like, well, let me tell you what I cannot have. And it's like, that's not what I asked you. I said, if you have a blank board, what would be on that board? And then the second one is taking action, actually trusting your intuition, which can be a scary thing to do, especially if it's a non-conventional move that you want to do. And you get that reinforcement all around you that says that doesn't make sense, or that's not a good idea, or whatever the feedback might be. So trusting yourself and being anchored more into, again, who you really are, because I think that can be so transformative.
Yeah, I really think through the whole anytime, and I call these quantum leaps. But anytime I've gone through a quantum leap, like from photography to technology, that was a quantum leap. From Atlanta to Costa Rica, that was a quantum leap. And I think I'm not one of those people, I don't meditate every day, but I can tell you when I've gone through these quantum leaps, I have been, and it's allowed me to like sit back and almost watch these things happening as if they were a movie in my life, and I'm just a participant in it. And it helped me. So, I mean, I can go back to the conversation that when my co-founders sat me down, they were like, Maria, just go. I could see that conversation right now, because in that I was just watching it as a movie, and I was just nodding my head like, you're right. And I do think that meditation, and it's not so much about meditation. Meditation is hard for a lot of people, but the ability to sit in silence and to try to tune into yourself is the goal of meditation. It's not like, oh, I need to quiet my mind, or those are all great things, but it's really the practice of when you have, oh, who should I call for advice about this? When you have that urge, it's the me. Like, let me sit down and really think through this. And I read this great book. When I was going through the quantum leap from from Atlanta to Costa Rica. And that was Wherever You Go, There You Are by John Kabat-Zinn. And it's a really, really great book for navigating life changes. And it's very digestible for folks who are resistant, not even resistant. It's just meditation's a hard concept and a hard thing to do.
I very much agree, because the one thing I promote, especially with people who are going through transformation, is that self-care is non-negotiable, because I think those are the moments when you have to stay really grounded into yourself, because you will always get plenty of feedback, and the experience that you're going to, such as my experience, kind of started with a crash before it went up. So it would have been a very easy choice to say, I'm just going to go back to corporate. But staying grounded into yourself in order to be able to connect your intuition, sixth sense, whatever you want to call it, especially in those moments. And in our mindset class, I told clients last week, self-care becomes especially non-negotiables, especially we're going through turbulent moments, because these are the moments where you really have to be interconnected to yourself and really clear. Because when this is a mishmash and going on, and it's reinforced by everything that's happening around you, that is not a good time to be making decisions. So, meditation, however, people envision this with the little Buddha on the side, or going for a walk, or whatever your thing is to quiet your mind down and ground you. I think you're so spot on. It's a must. Yeah, because it can be uncomfortable, and it can be scary, and it can be crazy, but it is so rewarding to see it on the other side.
So I have a question for you. Like, when you went through this big leap, what was one of the fears that you had? And I think we briefly talked about this, but what was your biggest fear? And like, did that manifest, or did that happen? Like when you did your big jump?
So my biggest reservations were, of course, finances and benefits, because my husband is an entrepreneur and I was the stable paycheck. So I was going to take that away and start literally from zero. And it is ironic, because my husband, I quit in August, I stopped working in September, and like maybe a week later, my husband, like a big contract that he had got paused, and it was like this, oh my gosh, this is happening, like, and then he was freaking out. So he was like, well, now we're in this situation because you quit. So now the guilt was there, right? The self-doubt was 100% there. The worries was there, like, how are we going to make it? And, to exactly what I said, I had to just be like, okay, let's pause. Let's not freak out. What do I do with what I've got going right now? And I put myself into mindset coaching because I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start, but what I'm doing now feels right. And I remember because I told my husband when I quit, I said, I will do this for 1 year. And if in 1 year, this does not generate revenue, I'll go back to corporate. Well, in what year, I was definitely not where I wanted to be financially. And he said, well, you said, and I said, we're on the 5-year plan. I was like, I'm sticking with this. But yeah, it was scary and it was uncomfortable. And I remember seeing my old boss for my 40th birthday. My husband asked if I can have my old job back. And I was like, what? It was definitely uncomfortable. And we went through that period of a lot of discomfort, but long term, I am so glad I chose to stick to what felt right. It didn't make sense at the time. It didn't make sense financially. If you looked at how things were, it didn't make sense for how the business was taking off. But there was this feeling inside. And I got a colleague reached out with a great offer to go back to corporate right when things were like kind of rock bottom. And I was tempted. I was like, wow, the salary, the security, the perceived security, right? Going back to what I know. But I was like, something inside me was like, don't say yes, just stick to where you are. And long term, I know that was so much the right decision.
I think so many parts of that story just hit on the journey of what it's like on that leap, because the last 10% of the leap is always the hardest. It's like when, the contract gets paused, right? And then you get this offer that's like, ooh, this could solve all of our problems. But I feel like once we've seen like what our passion is, or what our personal legend is, or what we really want to do, like what really motivates us, once we've seen a glimpse of that, if we don't pursue that and pursue it through, there's always going to be a part of us that's like, man, and what if, and so often I think when we're shown that, like when we can clearly see this is the next move and this is the next leap, that's the time to take it, because the universe won't wait forever. It's up to us to take that. And so yeah, it's just a really beautiful thing to watch people when they make these leaps and then look back and they're like, man, all of that stuff, it all happened. It was scary. It wasn't like a little tiny roller. It wasn't like little baby roller coasters. It was the scream machine or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But excuse me, it was worth it. And like once you start following your journey, personal legend, whatever you want to call it, there's just an alignment that comes with that, and a happiness that makes, I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but that makes hard things easier to handle.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I think a strong why and a real belief into what you do goes a long way. If I didn't get the satisfaction I get of what I do, I don't think I would have stuck through that journey, because there have been plenty of bumps. But, doing something that I love, and yeah, it's an incredible journey. It really is. And maybe somebody out there who is having a crazy feeling inside, like, trust your instincts, because I always tell people your instinct will never take you on the wrong path. And I'll just wrap up with this. Is last night in Mindset, we were talking about the discomfort that comes with changes and following your intuition. And as I took myself back to my journey and to that low point, I was like, where was the comfort? And I was like, wow, there really was no comfort. There was like, not one area of my life was comfortable. No, it affected my marriage. It affected my family. It affected me financially. It affected me there was like not like a comfort place. Everything was like a big upheaval. And it's almost like everything old had to be uprooted so that the new can spring up.
Gotta clear it out.
Yeah, Maria, I can keep talking to you forever. It's such a fun conversation. I knew that was going to happen. Maria, tell us, what's your definition of rebellious?
Being true to yourself and really understanding who you are. That's my definition of rebellious.
Love it. And Maria, leave us with a piece of advice or a favorite quote, anything that you want to leave with our listeners.
So I mentioned this once before, maybe twice, but I think the the biggest advice I can give anybody, no matter where you are, like, even if you're not even thinking about a big life change, if, wherever you are, I think one of the most difficult things we can learn how to do in this life is tuning out the noise of the world and learning to tune into ourselves. And if we can do that, then through that, we can get clarity on really truly what we want and who we are as a person. And I think that's the path to not thinking like, am I happy? Just being happy. And obviously emotions always change, but I really think that finding the space and quietness to tune out everything else and to tune into oneself is the most important piece of advice I could share.
Definitely aligns with what I think. I think it's beautiful. Maria, where can people find you online, website? If they would like to follow you, check out what you do.
Well, I'm usually out surfing in Playa Grande. So if you come down to Costa Rica,
There we go to Costa Rica and go surfing.
But you can probably the fastest way to the LinkedIn.com or LinkedIn, Maria Joyner. You can also reach me at maria@founderscale.com. Yeah, that's probably the best two ways to reach me is on LinkedIn or via email.
Maria, I'm so grateful for your time today. Thank you for inspiring us and sharing your story. And, I feel really like smiling. Like you said, my soul is jumping, my heart is jumping, because it feels so good to talk to people who are aligned with themselves, and you can just feel the difference of energy. So thanks for being with us today. I do hope you guys enjoyed these conversations. Make sure to send any questions that you have. And as always, stay rebellious. See you next time. Can't get enough of those rebellious conversations? Do make sure you subscribe, like, and share.